Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. I'm very, very excited to bring on Dr. Sherry O'Donnell, who is running for U.S. Senate. She has her work cut out for her, but I really, really feel that that's one of the reasons why I built these platforms is to give exposure to the folks who deserve it. The people who have stood up in the past, the people who continue to stand up currently, that basically are just you and I, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And so I'm very, very excited for this interview today. So I'm going to bring her on right now. Dr. Sherry O'Donnell, welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast.
Garrett, thank you so much. It's great to see you and to have the opportunity to speak to some of your followers.
Absolutely. And coincidentally, most of my followers are probably followers of you because, going to your platform, going to your website, I resonated with basically everything that you stand for, what you've been fighting for, especially as a medical doctor. And you've been fighting for the past several years, just like all of us. So we're kind of all in this together. But I just want to kind of bring the audience the attention right now to, why are you even running in this statewide race?
Garrett, great question. And again, thank you so much for having me on. So why am I running? That's been obviously a common question, but I'm running because so many people like ourselves woke up during COVID. Garrett, you're a chiropractor and been running your business, and all of a sudden some of the COVID nonsense, you got involved. Well, the same with me. Because I've been to 35 different countries and most of them have been on short-term missions and disaster relief. When COVID was first at its inception, I got a phone call on a Friday afternoon asking me to go to New York City. I said, ma'am, I know nothing about COVID. And she said, nor does anybody else. That conversation went to the place that I was finally asked, would I go? Because I can work in untraditional settings, little supplies and chaotic environments. And I'm here to tell you that's what New York City was. But that afternoon when she called me, I said, you know what, if I'm a first responder around the world, how can I not when my own country needs me? I found myself the following week going to New York City. And Garrett, I would fly out on Friday. The first week I flew out on Thursday because I was supposed to get orientation. There wasn't any orientation. We were the orientees. But I would fly out on Friday, work Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, come back to Michigan on Monday and work in my office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and fly out again. During that tenure, one of the other things that I did was I was bringing supplies, medical supplies that the hospital needed because in New York City, we couldn't get simple supplies. That's nonsense. That's craziness. We weren't allowed to use Solumetrol on the patients. I was asked to sign 4 death certificates on patients that did not die of COVID, but they asked me to sign these certificates. I said, no, I won't. They took the certificates back from me and said, that's okay, we'll find somebody else. I'll tell you what, during some of what I saw, it became very apparent we were not doing what we should have done. Same time I'm seeing Black Lives Matter fire up and burn down cities while everybody else is being masked and told to stay home. Our state went crazy, as did our nation. And that's when I said, wait a second, somebody's got to stand up and speak the truth. About that time, so did some of the mama bears across our state, and so did the hornet's nest get stirred up, and we realized we were not being told the truth. So why am I in this? Because somebody's got to stand up and do what's right by our state and by our nation. So as you know, I ran for Congress the last time, got 40% of the vote, not 51% of the vote. When Stabenow stepped down or said she wasn't running again in January, I started getting some phone calls from across the state and Washington, D.C. So over the past year and a half or year, when I hadn't been running any longer for Congress, I still stayed active. I became the state chair for the organization, U.S. Term Limits. I was on the 5th District Executive Committee, and I've been going around the state doing things. When the 3 proposals came out last November that we voted on, I did 28 educational forums to try to tell the people the hideous proposals that represented and what it would do to Michigan Constitution. So anyway, in January, I started getting phone calls and I kept saying, no, I did not want to do this statewide run. I'm still practicing medicine, which has obviously had to change some. But finally, course of events, I wound up seeing the movie Sound of Freedom. And those in the audience, if they've not seen it, that is a must see. But Garrett, when I saw that movie and listened to Tim Ballard at the end, I realized, wow, that guy has paid the price. He's laid his life down. as a Christian, I realized with tears streaming down my face, so did my Savior lay his life down. And I had to ask self, and I hope everybody in this listening audience asks self, what price is too great to pay? And I thought, you know what? There is no price too great to pay. Stepping back from my practice, dealing with liberalism that I'm not accustomed to because our district is very red, where I ran for Congress, that there is no price too great to pay. Rolled up the sleeves and said, I'm in it. Let's get it done.
So let's go back to your decision to run against Congressman Tim Wahlberg. You know, why did you want to primary him? What was he doing wrong at the time where you're like, you know what, this guy's the wrong fit for this district?
So let's back up. My initial run was going to be against Fred Upton. And Fred Upton had definitely made some bad choices, in my opinion. And with the redistricting, it put me against him. As I looked at the redistricting and then looked at Tim, what I realized is he'd been in a long time, 34 years. And in my opinion, had not been doing what he should have been doing, was not representing we the people. And where were any of our elected officials during COVID and the shutdown and the mask mandates? And now even the vaccine mandates that we've gone through. I thought, you know what, somebody needs to stand up and do something. I'm an osteopathic physician. And you know, so of course my initials after my name are D.O. So my whole team was calling me the Dr. Do because Wahlberg wasn't doing. And I am a doer. I'm a fighter and a mover and a shaker, and I will get things done. But when I looked at the redistricting, I thought, well, where do I go? Do I go against Upton? But that was really out of my districting after the redistricting and the lines that were drawn. Or do I go against Wahlberg? And I thought, you know what? My church was in District 5. My home was in District 5. My practice was in District 5. And literally, Garrett, it cut my community, my county in half. So half the people that I'd represented as a physician and that I'd had relationships with were cut out of my district. But I thought with all the lining up of the district, I needed to go against 5 or run in 5. And when I saw that Wahlberg was not doing what I thought he should be, I thought, okay, I'll run in 5.
So going into like your profession, especially, I'm sure you are getting a lot of negativity for your stances on medical freedom, on your stances on the COVID vaccine. What is your stances with the COVID vaccine? What's your stance on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and the things that they're starting to say, oh yeah, now you can prescribe those things for COVID. So how did that evolve? Like, and when this started to basically start during the lockdowns and the frontline doctors were getting hammered, not only by their profession, but the bureaucrats and big pharma and everything else.
So Garrett, great question. So when I was in New York City, the first thing I want to address is I was given the opportunity to deal with patients, see patients, and that forced me into an immediate research and understanding that. I came up with a research protocol in New York City that had it been implemented, I know it would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But very early, I started treating. My office never shut down. We started treating with hydroxychloroquine. I also signed on with the American Freedom Doctors. Never really did anything with them because I was busy in New York and busy with my own practice. But I started treating. It was the same treatment protocol, interestingly enough, that Dr. Peter McCullough had advocated. And Dr. Malone, and we'll get back to Dr. Malone and Peter McCullough, who have both endorsed me. But I started treating. And then the hospital came against me, brought me before the Professional Conduct Committee because I was using hydroxychloroquine for an off-label usage. Now, you and I both know, being in medicine, that off-label usage happens oftentimes with medications. But I was brought before the Professional Conduct Committee. At that point in time, I submitted 208 research articles. I listed the patients that I'd used hydroxychloroquine on that they were questioning. And with that, I showed day of symptoms, date of resolution of symptoms, date of the day that we started the protocol that I'd used with hydroxychloroquine. And I was called before Professional Conduct Committee. Now, Professional Conduct Committee, for those that don't know, it's for a physician that has done such an egregious act that they are brought before a jury of their peers and literally reprimanded and perhaps even sanctioned with their license. But when they had no report to say, when they brought me before the conduct committee, and I finally said, I don't want to seem adversarial, but with any of you in the room, please tell me how you're treating your outpatient patients. There were 12 physicians in that room, 2 pharmacists, and 2 IT people. And Garrett, when I asked that, can you tell me how you're treating your outpatient patients? There was silence. And I asked the same question again. I said, to avoid hospitalization, can you please tell me? Well, one shuffled through his briefcase and said, there's something with that Bam Bam antibody. He had no clue what he was talking about. And finally, I looked at the jury and said, you know what? You do what you need to do and you feel like you need to do. But I'm going to continue to treat my patients. You do what you need to do. But meeting over. And I got up and I walked out of that meeting. I continue to treat patients. Patients across the state were hearing that I was treating. I even treated a couple people across the United States. Maya Hahn, I don't know if you know Maya, I suspect you do, is part of Michigan Vaccine Choice. I've spoken for them. They actually gave me the Patriot Award, but I've continued to stand up and treat patients regardless of the difficulty that the hospital has given me. None of my patients, I have to say this, Garrett, because it's a God thing, but none of my patients that got on protocol ever wound up in the hospital. And three were hospitalized over a weekend that I didn't have the opportunity to see. And unfortunately, two of the three didn't make it out of the hospital. So I continue to treat.
That's frustrating, obviously, especially when you built that relationship. But again, you come back into thing. They call people like me that say these things like he's a conspiracy theorist because, hey, look, they didn't want to treat. They didn't want those folks to survive. Why? Because then they can push a vaccine and say that it cured all. And so that's the hard pill to swallow, as they say, as right now, because it didn't have to be this way. So
No, it didn't.
When the vaccine first started to come out with the COVID vaccine, what were your thoughts behind this Operation Warp Speed and everything else?
Initially, I was saying that is patient's choice. But the more that I've found, and of course, the more that's out, literally, I'm telling my patients now, I will throw myself in front of that door jamb and beg you not to get it. We've seen that literally the complications of the vaccine, if you have the audacity to call it that, but
True.
the complications of the vaccine has actually caused more complications and more deaths than COVID itself. So I am egregiously against it, fiercely against it, and saying, please don't do that. And I'm speaking loud and proud against it. Has it been easy in my community? No. You said, have I been come against? Yes. Initially, when I'd get a phone call from some of my colleagues, it was like, is this friend or foe? And, it caused a lot of relationships, that sorry about that, a lot of relationships that were on the line. But I actually had the opportunity to treat some physicians because they were coming to me when they were infected with COVID.
And just to let everyone know, you're at your office right now, correct?
I am. Sorry.
So again, this is why I'm a fan of you, Sherry, because again, ordinary people, you're not a career politician. You're not in this for some name recognition to be a politician. You're doing it because you feel in your heart and your soul that it's the right thing to do. And you're taking time away from your day right now to come on and speak about your passion, which is helping people. So just to let everybody know, she's in her personal office in her business, folks. And that's what we do. My clinic is running right now as I speak too. So I totally can resonate with what you're going to. But hey, to let everybody know too, Dr. Sherry O'Donnell's website for her run for Senate is in the description. You can go there and you click and you can see all the things that she stands for. And it's pretty much spot on to what a lot of us feel out there is, you're for medical freedom. You're against the overspending that's going on right now. Obviously, term limits, the invasion of the border, which you talk about on your website, against underage transition surgeries, right? All those things. Let's get into that because I want to play the devil's advocate with some of what the LGBTQ plus and whatever other symbol they want to add on to the little community, what they may say to you. So what are your thoughts of underage transition surgeries?
I believe they're barbaric, and I do not believe that they're medical treatment. We're treating a mental health crisis in our nation with surgeries that these young people will never be able to go back and undo. That is insanity. That is barbaric. I don't even know how some of the medical surgical colleges are even approving that. Years ago, if we would have maimed a patient, that would have been an automatic lawsuit that likely wouldn't have ever come before the courts. It would have been paid out immediately. This is insanity. The fact that they're even trying to hide that from parents is criminal. And I don't know how stronger to say that that is criminal. The colleges of surgery and so on should have never allowed that. And these young people are making decisions for themselves and their future that they're not old enough to buy a bottle of wine. They're not old enough to even go and fight in our military. They're not old enough to vote. And yet they're old enough to say, gee, I want to be the opposite sex of what I am. As medical people, Garrett, we know there are two sexes. There are biological men, and there are biological women. That is, it should not even be allowed. I shake my head and say, where are we as a nation? Why are we doing this?
So what would you say to the parent that goes to the medical doctor or the surgeon to start the transition with their child and say, hey, I know my 12-year-old, she was born a girl, but she is a boy. She played with Tonka trucks. She says she's a boy. She dresses like a boy. And I want to start puberty blockers and I want to start to do the medical transition. You know, do you agree that it's the parent's right to do that to their child?
No, I do not. I would strongly suggest that they get in counseling and do that beforehand and do the deep dive and suggest and try to educate them, show them of some of these suicidal increased rates that are happening afterwards and the medical crisis that puts people into after they have transitioned. There's enough research out there to show that the people that have transitioned early dreadfully regret it, but now it's too late. So I would really make certain that they have the informed consent, and I would absolutely push against that and help them to realize that that is a phase that they go through. When I was growing up, it was called a tomboy. I had 3 older brothers, Garrett, and I could climb the trees, and I wanted to do everything they could, but better. It didn't mean I was wanting to be a male. It doesn't mean that I had the capacity even to be a male. So what's happening, I think, is just absolutely wrong, and somebody has to protect these children.
Great answer. So let me move on to some more global politics. You know, Ukraine, you know, everything that's going on over there between Russia and Ukraine, which is kind of interesting in the fact that the spotlight has now moved to the Middle East and we don't even hear about Ukraine anymore. But the Biden administration continues to want to fund that war. What are your thoughts on Ukraine and Russia? Should we have donated any money? When should we have donated? Like, what are your thoughts throughout that whole situation?
Absolutely and unequivocally no. Garrett, you may or may not know that I physically took a medical team to Ukraine. When the Ukrainian war broke out in February 24th of a year and a half ago, it was 1 week later that we were there with a medical team. It was self-funded and donations from the private sector, and we went to help the civilians that were caught crossfire in a heinous war. We heard the bombs daily. We were right there. And we continued to send 8 medical teams. We pulled our last medical team out in December. But it should not be our government's responsibility for paying for a war that is never going to be won. That war has been ongoing more than the year and a half. When we were there, I literally heard, and the pastor that we worked with literally slammed the table one day and said, this war is about freedom. It's not new. They've had decades of the conflict between them because Russia wants this former Soviet Union. But the monies that are going there are absolutely wrong. And I don't think that we should be funding a governmental war that's not ever going to be won, especially with no accountability. Zelensky is also crooked. And I just don't think that our American dollars, especially when we're not willing to use that same American dollars in America, fighting our borders and fighting and closing those things. So I saw firsthand, I saw the civilians that were caught crosswire in this fire, this war, and I think we should not be funding it.
So not 1 penny should have went to Ukraine.
Not 1 penny. And Wahlberg, when I ran against him, that's one of the things that I attacked and said, why are we sending the first $6 billion? And we've continued to fund it without any accountability and without any end in sight.
If there would have been accountability or some kind of strategic plan with that funding, would you have supported it?
No.
What would you say to the folks that are for the funding and they bring up, and I see it all the time and I read the articles from the corporate liberal media that says, you know, we don't want Russia controlling all the resources that Ukraine has to offer. And they talk about starvation and the hunger and everything else because they would control the grain and the fertilizer and the minerals that are in the earth. What would your stance be to them when they say stuff like that? We need to be over there because if Russia does take over, they're going to control all this stuff. What do you say to them?
I certainly think that there's other avenues besides sending our American taxpayer dollars. Our taxpayers dollars need to be spent on our country, closing our border. Yes, Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, but they really do have the means to continue to do that. I think we need to continue to try to let them negotiate that and not be in the midst of it. I think we need to bring our taxpayer dollars home.
Now let's move on to the conflict that the spotlight is on, the Israeli Palestinian conflict, or Hamas and Hezbollah and everything else. Obviously, where is your stance with what's going on over there?
I think we need to stand with Israel. I think we need to continue to stop the attacks with the terrorism. But I think we also need to be very, very aware that that same terrorism is entering our borders as well. What's happening and what Hamas and Hezbollah is doing is unacceptable, is just is evil. You just don't do that. Israel has been our greatest domestic ally and democratic ally in the Middle East. I think we need to continue to foster that relationship of an ally that has been our strongest ally and try to stop that war.
And obviously, we see everything on corporate media because they really like to highlight conflict and disorder at home. But you're starting to see the Palestinians and the marches that are happening throughout our country right now in the major cities. What do you say to that conflict? Because it's obviously a very deep. It's not black and white. There's decades and decades of issues and situations. What do you say to the Palestinians that demand that they have a free state?
The Gaza Strip is Israel's, and those that are still attacking people in the Gaza Strip and attacking Israel unprovoked is unacceptable. When I was I don't know if you knew that I was in Turkey after the Turkey earthquake, or I responded to the Turkey earthquake in February of this year, and we were in Lebanon. And right now there's fighting going on in the Lebanon border in Israel as well. But I actually took care of a patient, Garrett, that she had the front of her scalp ripped apart, that we literally saw her skull. And her only crime, her only thing that she did wrong was after the earthquake, she went back to her home to see how much of her home was demolished. And she was beaten mercilessly by Hezbollah simply because she went back to her house and she was a Christian. The acts of terrorism has to be stopped. If we continue to allow that, that is allowing terrorism to continue to arise and gain a stronghold. We've got to make certain that gets stopped.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Terrorism has no place and they deserve to be eradicated. That's for sure. Well, your race is very crowded, and I thought the governor's race was crowded too when I was running. But I mean, you have some pretty heavy names in there to contend with, Chief James Craig, obviously with his name recognition, Mike Rogers, Michael Hoover, and Alexandria Taylor are also running. What separates you from those folks right now? What's going to give you that edge that are going to want people to say, you know what, I want to vote for Dr. Sherry O'Donnell?
Thank you. And I think that's going to be very clear as the voters see it. Number one, as we have already addressed, I am a physician, a female physician, and I'm going to be the only one that's going to be able to go against Alyssa Slotkin. And right now she's the Democratic candidate, and she's so far ahead of everybody else. But as a female physician, I can speak to, with credibility, the medical freedoms that are being stolen and ripped away from us. Also, with my experience logistically going in 35 different countries, I know how to work those logistics. Imagine right now, Garrett, that you are asked to go to Israel to help fight that. I've already been speaking with the Ministry of Health and looking at that. And I may very well go into Israel if their medical need overwhelms the capacity for them to take care of some of the victims. So my logistically traveling across 35 different countries, serving the people. And that brings the next point. I am a servant. I'm a physician, not a politician. And I think not only the listeners, but the voters in Michigan are so ready for a fresh breath and to get rid of the establishment and to get rid of the politicians, because the politicians have led us to where we are now. I think also the fact that I am a business owner. I've owned my own practice like you. I've owned my own practice, working my own practice. I understand small businesses in Michigan and the difficulty that we've had with some of the taxation, some of the overreach of government, even in a small business aspect. So I'm a business owner, world traveler, servant, physician, and put me on the platform with Alyssa Slotkin, and I will pulverize her.
Yeah, I think we all would look forward to that day. That is for sure. So let's talk a little bit about fundraising, because you and I talked briefly before the interview about, when you run statewide, Michigan is a big state. And, even for running for governor, we logged in, I think, over 43,000 miles in our campaign car. We've raised over $2.2 million. And before the primary, we raised more money than any other candidate at the time. And we were allowed to get a couple commercials on. But we talked about, even with the movement that I had behind me, we would do 3 to 5 events a week. And on average, we would see anywhere from 100 to 200 folks at those events. So people have to realize that you can just only do so many boots on the ground. Michigan is not Rhode Island. It is an enormous state, and you only have so much time during the day. And so with all those events, I only literally got in front of anywhere from 52,000 to 75,000 people that knew me, that talked to me, that listened to me. Then we have the other elephant in the room, is the 2 million plus votes you need to win. I mean, how do you even get around your mind on how to reach those folks? And the only way is, unfortunately, is corporate media is getting airtime, getting your messaging across. Because looking at your website, Dr. Sherry, it looks great. It's everything that we stand for. And a lot of the other folks have similar stances. That's what we ran into the governor's race. But it's who can get the messaging out. And how are you going to contend with that? How are you going to get the over 2.7 million you probably need? Because in the 2020 election with Gary Peters and John James, Gary Peters got 2.7, and John James, who continues to vote on the side of the establishment, which I'll point out, which I invited him on the show, but he has not gotten back to me to defend his vote. So I put that out there. He only got 2.6 million. So how are you going to reach those folks? I mean, where are you at with your fundraising?
So let me address first off, I think we need both an air game as well as a ground game. So and the biggest portion of my fundraising is going to come from the grassroots. But we have a couple coalitions in place also. So right now, as I started to say earlier, that I would get to Dr. Malone and Dr. Peter McCullough, who have great name recognition amongst the conservatives. Dr. McCullough has already endorsed me. Dr. Malone had me on a Zoom meeting, and the listeners loved what I had to say and resonated with that message. They're looking at right now how they can best fund the campaign. I also have 2 PACs going on in Washington, D.C., that as soon as we get that rolling, the PACs will continue to raise that money for me. But it's going to be from the blue collar. It's going to be the biggest percentage is going to be from the grassroots, because we are a grassroots operation, right? So I am not the politician. I am a physician, but I will represent we the people. And when we the people are hearing that message, Garrett, it's going wide and loud, and people are very excited to get behind me as the candidate. So it is boots on the ground, but it's also going to be the air game. I've done several radio interviews, and that's continuing to grow as other radio announcers and viewers are hearing that. They're saying, hey, we want O'Donnell. I have a radio interview tomorrow. I've been with Trucker Randy. I've been with Ron Jolly as the interview tomorrow. So that's continuing to go across. I also have been with Doug Spade in the southeast corner of the state, and people are getting behind it. We're starting to see a lot of the traction and a lot of the movement. How are we going to fundraise? By we the people, by the blue collar. But I have some of the people that are able to oil that machine coming behind me.
You're exactly right. You need both. Not
Yes.
only need the boots on the ground, but you obviously have to get on the airwaves. And it is a process. There's no doubt about it. So let's talk about President Trump. Are you looking for his endorsement?
I am looking for his endorsement. President Trump has fared very well in Michigan, and I am in contact with some of his endorsement team. Right now, he needs to get through what he's going through and the persecution. I'll leave it at that, persecution. But right now, we're looking for all endorsements. And on the flip side of that, I will continue to support President Trump, but I will also support any Republican presidential candidate that we have that wins the primary. But I've been a Trump supporter. He had great and fantastic policy, and I'll continue to do so. Will I receive his endorsement? Gladly and proudly.
Amen. Let's go into what I really feel was, the downfall of a lot of Republicans in the last cycle was being pro-life in the stances. Being a conservative and what we stand for, it's hard. It's not always easy to have the beliefs and values and what you stand upon, and how you handle that topic is pretty critical in today's standard, especially with Proposal 3 being passed by 56.6% of Michiganders. And so what is your stance on pro-life, and how are you going to talk to the folks in the middle who are like, well, the women's have the right to basically abort their babies? What's your stance, and how are you going to deal with that?
So, Garrett, I am pro-life. My life has been serving people and saving lives. But I am looking for the day that no woman would ever feel coerced or pressured into having an abortion. I also am looking for the day that we hold men as accountable as these ladies that have made the tough decision to carry through with their pregnancy. And right now, the fact that employers are paying $4,000 to some patients or their employees that want to have an abortion, I'm looking for that same $4,000 going to the women that have decided to carry that pregnancy to term. I'm also very interested that 65% of women have said they would not have had the abortion had they had the support that they needed. I'm looking for us to support those women, not only through the pregnancy, but also through the early birth of that child. So we need to come alongside these women and make certain that they have in place things that are necessary, that there would be no coercion or pressure to having the abortion. And I think we can agree upon those things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm Catholic. I've been very vocal on it. I was donkey of the week on Charlemagne by God, I think the guy's name is, for my stance as being a Catholic. Yeah, I'm 100% unapologetically pro-life, and I will always be that way. Every person I've ever talked to who was born, they were always pretty glad that they were born. So yes, that's for sure. Well, thank you so much.
Here's the other thing that I want to
go ahead.
If I can say one more thing. The other thing I want to speak to that is when the left side says that we're not interested in women's health and that we would choose the life of an unborn infant over the woman, I want to let people know that that is just all but heresy. You know this in medicine. We're going to choose the life that is most viable. In disaster relief, we have seconds to decide who we're going to save when it's mass casualty. And when I get put against Alyssa Slotkin, I can absolutely say, excuse me, yes, I'm for women's health. 65% of my patient population is women. Yes, I'm for women's health. And the lies and the rhetoric that is being said that we're not for women's health if we're pro-life is just that. It is a lie. And I can tell patients, yes, I am for women's health. And we're never going to select the health of an unborn infant if it is in life and death situation over the woman. And that happens so rarely. So again, I am pro-life from the womb to the tomb and beyond, but that is both the woman's life and her needs, as well as that unborn infant's life.
Yeah, the left always wants to bring up the very, very small percent of, rape and incest and everything else. And I really don't believe that, having Proposal 3 being passed in the state of Michigan, I don't think they knew what they were voting for. And I think they can do abortions up till birth now. And that's horrendous. And, to combat that, why don't those folks watch a video of what happens with an abortion? I think a lot of them would change their minds real quick of just the horrors of what that entails. That's for sure.
Last October, November, I did 28 educational proposals and education forums across our district to try to get people to understand what was included in that proposal.
Amen. Let's just switch topics. But if you have a few more minutes, I want to get to this because it's a pretty hot topic right now. I really believe what's going to happen in, the independents, suburban women, especially in the clown show, as I'm calling it, is what's going on with these school boards, with, Gavin Newsom and everything else, with taking away parental rights and the alphabet mafia really just trying to infuse the beliefs and values in the school, which we all understand and know that it's separation of church and state for a reason. And I really believe that that community is really getting very cultish or religious like, and they want to force themselves onto these kids. And unfortunately, in a lot of these states, these Democrat-run states, they're allowing that to happen and not really making it all inclusive, because they're discriminating against Christians and Muslims and people who have faith against that. And what are your thoughts on that? Like with what's going on, the school boards and taking away parental rights and having these pornographic books, shoved down these kids' throats. I mean, what is your stance on all that?
So I've stood with parents. I've gone to the school board meetings. I've stood with parents. We the Parents organizations, Tammy Clark in Michigan, with the Stand Up Michigan, that's also one of the things that she's advocating for, is the rights of our children, the rights of our parents. So that is wrong. That is criminal. Where the academia in Michigan right now is dropping at a faster rate but at a considerable rate and an inverse proportional rate of our suicide. So our academia is decreasing, our suicide rate is increasing, and we're forcing and we're gauging these young kids into becoming LGBTQ and whatever other alphabet they want to add to it. We need to get back to academia and not pornography in our schools. And that's some of the books that have been in the schools here locally are disgusting books. I've read some excerpts from the books myself, so I knew it was included in those. And I am for absolutely banning those. We don't allow pornography anywhere else, and yet we're allowing it in our schools. There's a felon against child pornography, and yet that is happening in our schools. I think we need to dismantle the departments of education and get it back to, we the parents have the right to know what our children are being educated on. My proposal would be that by the end of the school year every year, that the school textbooks and the curriculum is accessible to the parents, that they have the right to preview that. And then the parents would have to get back to the schools to acceptance by the beginning of the school year, but that the parents need to know, and they should not have to go through a FOIA to understand what their kids are being taught.
What about the issue with biological men using girls' locker rooms and bathrooms?
Insanity, insanity, insanity. Okay. We both know, especially as medical people, and that's the other place that I can stand and will stand head and shoulders against my opponents with this. There are only two sexes. Men should compete against men. Women should compete against biological women. To do that is nonsense. I'm a member of and been associated with She Leads Michigan, that funnels up through She Leads Michigan, and then She Leads America. That's an organization, a Christian coalition of people that are fighting for faith-based solutions for current day problems. I bring that up because Riley Gaines has been recently honored as one of the She Leads America young people. She's been fighting strong and hard against some of that. We see the injustices. What's happening with that, especially on a collegiate level, when we allow that, it's disallowing young girls that are fantastic athletes from getting some of the scholarships that they otherwise would, from not getting the wins that they actually would have. That's not okay. And wherever that was thought to be okay I just keep questioning, where are we going? Where are we as a nation? Why are we allowing that? I can see that in the Olympics next. Gary, we just need a reset. On our computers, we take a reset. In our culture right now, we just need to hit a reset.
I would agree.
With that.
My wife is a Division I volleyball player. She played at Western Michigan, and all the ground that women has gained over the past couple decades have been lost literally with one administration. And I really believe this, Dr. Sherry, that look, if Republicans should just get on talking points and get on the right issues, and I really feel the things that we talked about today, especially with biological men using women's bathrooms, not allowing them to compete in women's sports if you're a guy, getting the porn out of the schools, allowing parental rights to thrive, which it should. I think if Republicans can come together and we can unite under some of these topics, I think we clean house, because middle America is sick of it. The progressive leftists, the 36, 37% of society, these Marxists, we're never going to change them. We're never going to reach them. We can't work with them. But it's the folks in the middle, and I really feel that the Democrats have went way to the left and they're not coming back. And so if we can communicate effectively the topics that you hit on today, I think we clean house. I truly do.
I believe so too. And I think we need to, the Dems walk lock and stock. They vote in block, they vote in stock. And it's like, what, we need to understand that there is a group of even the moderate Democrats that are just tired of where we're going. And I think, yes, we will sweep house, and we just need to understand that we need to get engaged. We need to be involved. I was never involved politically before COVID, as I've said, but everyone listening and every one of the Republicans in Michigan, as well as across the United States, if we were to get engaged, get involved, stop some of the infighting, and come united underneath some of the policies and some of the things on which we stand, we absolutely would have that red sweep.
In going into the politics, because it is a clown show, as we all are well aware of, what do you think with what's going on with the Michigan Republican Party, with everything, the infighting and the craziness? What's your thoughts on that?
We need to stand united. We need to get behind those that are in office right now, and with the MIGOP, stop some of the infighting. I've likened this much to an NBA basketball team. They can fight like the Dickens in the locker room, but when they come out on the court, they expect to win. They better play as a team. We've got to stop the division. We've got to stop the fighting. We've got to come together so that we can win these elections.
Well said. Well said. Dr. Sherry, we can't thank you enough for coming on, especially during your busy time right now, to come on and just give your views to all of us out here. Thank you so much. And good luck. We'll be watching, that's for sure.
Thank you, Garrett. And again, please look at my website and my Facebook, and then like those posts that we have, DocSherry2024.com, and then DocSherry2024 DocSherry4Senate@gmail.com.
And I'll make sure I include those into the description for folks to follow you. Thank
Garrett,
you so much for your time. You're
God
welcome.
bless you. God bless Michigan, and God bless the United States. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, man, there is some great people running, that is for sure. I really liked what Dr. Sherry had to say. It's going to be interesting to watch her journey. But if you like what you had to say, or what she had to say, excuse me, you can follow her. She's on social media everywhere. I'll tag her in this live and in this post for you all to follow. But she had some very, very great things to say, and I'll continue to do my part. I've reached out to all the other candidates. I'm in contact with most of the other candidates for the U.S. Senate to bring them on for you to hear their views. But we have a great lineup that will continue to come forth, and we'll continue to get bypass the corporate media and allow you all to see and hear from these candidates. So until next time, God bless you. God bless the Michigan, of course, and always, God bless these United States. Talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.